Get back to the text in Genesis. Does anybody have anything particular they want to ask about or they want to focus on before we get started?
It seems like it's written a little bit different from the Bibles that I'm used to. Like,
Okay, just this particular translation?
Yeah.
Okay, in what way is it different from the Bibles that you're used to? How does this sound different or feel different?
when I was reading, it's more like to the point.
Okay.
Like, but I don't know. It's
Okay,
I don't know how to explain it.
Let me ask you, are you accustomed to the King James Bible? Is that what you
Yeah.
are? Okay. And that's a lot of these and thous and doths and very formal language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is because like the King James Bible was, it was translated in the 17th century for the use of the church, people in the Church of England. Now, in the 17th century, we made more distinctions between, say, the formal you and the casual you, right? Does anybody here, have any of you ever taken German? Okay, German is actually is a good analog. It's actually pretty closely related to English in a lot of ways. In German, there is an informal you, du, that you use with your family and your close friends. There is also a formal you, capital S-I-E-Z, that you use when speaking to anyone else. Strangers, work associates, casual acquaintances. Now, what you see with all those these and thous and whatnots, English used to have a formal you. Thou was the formal form of you. And when the King James Bible was translated in the 17th century, people still used the formal you. Eventually that sort of disappears from the language. We stopped doing that. We just start calling everybody by the casual you. But yeah, that's the difference you've noticed, is sort of the date of translation. This translation is done by Robert Alter, the same guy who wrote that Art of Biblical Narrative book that I recommended to you. And Alter is trying to stay as close to the spirit of the original language as possible. So he's eliminating a lot of those little flourishes that a lot of us might be used to when reading the Bible. Now, Jalen, you had a hand up a second ago.
I was just going to say that it's way easier for me to understand.
Yeah, because the level of language is toned down a bit, right? From the rhetorical excesses of the King James Version. Yeah, this is meant to be a very sort of plain-spoken version. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, Secret.
I'm trying to understand in Genesis 32 when Jacob was renamed to Israel.
Okay. Jacob is renamed. Okay, so this is the portion where he wrestles with this unnamed figure, right? Okay, so page 115. Would you be so kind as to read that for us?
And he rose on that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 slave girls and his 11 boys, and he crossed over the Jabbok ford. And he took them and brought them across the stream, and he brought across all that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. And he saw that he had not gone out against him, and he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip socket was wrenched as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." And he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Not Jacob shall your name hence be said, but Israel. For you have striven with God and men, and won out." And Jacob asked and said, "Tell your name, pray." And he said, "Why should you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Peniel.
Yep.
I have seen God face to face, and I came out alive, and the sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel. and he was limping on his hip. Therefore, the children of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh, which is by the hip socket to this day, for he had touched Jacob's hip socket at the sinew of the thigh.
Okay, good. Thank you. And what part of this were you concerned or confused about?
The whole
thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jacob gathers up his family. They cross this river, and he's met by a stranger. They wrestle, and the stranger gives Jacob a new name when this is over, right? And then we're told the reason why Jews don't eat any piece of meat that has the sciatic nerve still in it, right? Kosher butchering rules require them to remove the sciatic nerve, this hip nerve. So, first off, the importance of the name Israel. Right, Jacob is regarded as the father of the Israelites, yes. So, much of the book of Genesis, right, if we just break down the word Genesis, right, it comes from a Greek word that means origin, creation, beginning. And what other modern word can we see that that obviously has the same root? Yeah, genetics, right? Or genealogy. And in a lot of ways, what the book of Genesis is an extended genealogy of the people of Israel, the Israelites. Right? So it ends with the stories of the children of Jacob. Right? This guy who's been renamed Israel, for he has striven with God and won. I'm not sure if that's what the word Israel actually translates to. And this is one of sort of the mysteries of a lot of these early texts, is that the meanings of the names that are ascribed to people don't often match up with the actual meanings of the word, right? Now, Israel, the root El, I know, means God, yeah. El was the sky god of the Canaanites, the people who lived just adjacent to the Israelites. And he shares a lot of features in common with the Israelite God Yahweh. And we will remember from last time, right? What does the word Elohim mean? We talked about the Elohist strand in the narrative. What does Elohim mean?
Just regular God.
Yeah, Elohim is, God's lowercase g,
Yeah,
right?
Just,
Yeah.
Just any God in particular.
Yeah, Adonai is Lord. Yeah. So yeah, Elohim means gods in general. So it's the same root word, right? El. So Israel, I know, is something God. All right, just as you know, anybody whose name ends in if your first name ends in El, right? It's something God. It's derived from Hebrew. Right? My own first name is Michael, for example, right? Michael, he who is godlike. We won't press that. All right. So, we have this wrestling match between Jacob and who?
This unnamed guy.
This unnamed guy, yeah. Why does the guy not give his name? Who is he wrestling with?
God.
He's wrestling with God, yeah. He has contended with God, he has striven with God, and has won. Or at the very least, not been pinned, not been defeated. And so he extracts this blessing from this unnamed figure. Now, does this fit in with Jacob's larger history?
He tends to run away from the Genesis. He's broken up and kill him.
Well, yeah. We know that Jacob is the physically weaker of the two twin sons of Isaac, right? Esau is bigger and stronger than he is. But how does... So again, using physical strength to extract a blessing from someone doesn't seem to be quite his style. But is there a way in which this does fit in with his larger... If we look at his larger history, right? What do we know about Jacob and Esau? Yeah, Esau, right, is a hunter, right, and Jacob is, as you said, is a mild man and a dweller in tents. I love that phrase, dweller in tents. Doesn't go out much. And what's their relationship with their parents like? Yeah, Esau is the older son. They're twins, but Esau came out first, with Jacob grabbing his heel. So Esau is the older son. So we have this primogeniture issue, right? Esau is supposed to have the birthright. Esau is supposed to inherit when Isaac dies. But it doesn't work out that way. Why not? Yeah. Does Jacob fool only his father? Yeah, he kind of cons his brother out of the birthright, right? It's like, oh, you want some of this stew? Huh? I bet you're hungry. Yeah, you can have some of this stew if you give me your rights of inheritance. And Esau, apparently being rather hasty, doesn't really seem to think this through, right? So he takes the stew from Jacob and trades in his birthright. And then, what else does Jacob get that's supposed to be Esau's? The blessing from his father, right? Yeah. He dresses up in hides, right? Goat hides, so that he seems hairy like his brother. Because their father's blind and won't know the difference. And when Isaac reaches out to touch him, right, he smells a rat. He hears Jacob's voice, but it's like, okay, this feels like Esau. All right, son, here's your blessing. And the blessing he's given, right on page 111, may God grant you from the dew of the heavens and the fat of the earth an abundance of grain and drink. May peoples serve you and nations bow before you. Be overlord to your brothers. May your mother's sons bow before you. Those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you blessed. Right? Be overlord to your brothers. That's the big thing here. And then what's left for Esau? Apparently blessings are a finite resource, right? You can only give so much. So Esau gets, look, from the fat of the earth be your dwelling, and from the dew of the heavens above. By your sword shall you live, and your brother shall you serve. And when you rebel, you shall break off his yoke from your neck. So, is the blessing he gives Esau entirely hopeless? No, it's like eventually you will break off your brother's yoke. But if he's under his brother's yoke in the first place, what does this suggest about what's going to happen to Esau and his descendants? Well, maybe not curse, right? This isn't a curse per se.
They're not gonna have as much as
Yeah, they're going to be a subservient people, right? A subject people to the younger brother. So once again here we have the younger brother triumphing over the older brother. Right. The older brother passed over. For for reasons that are maybe a little bit iffy, right? I mean, does Jacob seem like a particularly upright, virtuous, or honorable character? Yeah.
His mom just gonna decide that it's gonna be him and not his brother, she helps.
Yeah. I mean, Esau is, maybe, hasty, but he seems to be relatively honest and forthright at the very least, right? But Jacob accomplishes things mostly through trickery. Yeah, Ty.
The thing with his mama on page like 109.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It seems as though like, because he taught her this, she was gonna make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she gets this prophecy when she's pregnant, right? The younger son will prevail over the elder. And remember, again, what is Jacob eventually going to be renamed as? Right, and he fathers 12 sons, who then themselves become the fathers of the 12 tribes that would make up the nation of Israel. So what we have here elsewhere in the narrative are these genealogies of not only the Israelite people, but of all of the related peoples around them, right? And how they relate to the Israelites, and a sort of explanation for why those relations are not always friendly. Right, so what, for example, is the nickname that Esau is given when he comes in starving and asking for that red stuff? If we look on page 110. The second graphic panel there. Yeah. Let me gulp down some of this red stuff. I'm famished. Therefore is his name called Edom. And Edom, the note tells us, is a play on the Hebrew word Adom, which means red. Now, the important thing here about the name, therefore is he called Edom, one of the peoples immediately adjacent to the kingdom of Israel were called the Edomites. They were sometimes allies, sometimes enemies. They acknowledged that they came from a similar cultural root. But Esau is, at least according to the book of Genesis genealogies, the father of this particular nation, the Edomites, right? And if we look at the story as well of Isaac and Ishmael, now we don't really get very much about Ishmael in the excerpts that you read for today. They just didn't include those parts in this anthology. But who's Ishmael?
He's technically the firstborn son, but born by the slave girl Hagar.
Yeah. Ishmael is Abraham's oldest son. Ishmael is the firstborn son of Abraham. And he's one of many sons we see of biblical patriarchs who are born not to a legitimate wife, but to the wife's handmaiden or slave, like to a concubine. A little bit more on that in a moment, what's going on with that. But at any rate, he is the firstborn son, regarded as a legitimate son, and yet he will not inherit. His brother Isaac will inherit. Isaac is the father of Jacob, and Jacob will be the father of the Israelites. Ishmael, on the other hand, we get this lineage of Ishmael on page 108, right? His 12 sons. Who are essentially the ancestors. They're regarded as the ancestors today of the Arab peoples. So you see actually very different narratives about Isaac and Ishmael in the Quran and in Islamic tradition than you do in Judeo-Christian tradition, right? They both acknowledge, all three acknowledge the existence of these two figures and the importance of these two figures, but in Islam, Ishmael is regarded as the favored son because historically he's regarded as their ancestor. So these 12 sons of Ishmael, right? Ishmael is the ancestor of the ancestors of the Arabs, who of course would not have been called Arabs at this time. They would have gone by a variety, Midianites, for example, and various other names. So Isaac as the ancestor of the Israelites is favored. We see the same thing in the discussion of Noah's sons, right? It's a reflection of relationships between these various peoples at the time the biblical text was actually written down, right? We have these three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And we know that Ham is the father of a son named Canaan, right? Canaan is the only son of any of these three who's named specifically. And why is it important that Canaan is named specifically? What other associations do we have with this name Canaan?
Canaanites.
Yeah, the Canaanites, the people who were in the Promised Land when the Israelites got there, right? When they made the exodus from Egypt, right? They didn't come into empty territory. There was somebody else already living there. The descendants of Canaan. So Ham's mysterious sin in the Noah story, right, where he sees his father's nakedness and tells his brothers about it, but we really kind of have no idea what any of that means. And I mean, no one has any idea what any of that means. It's extremely cryptic. Some scholars say it points to some kind of sexual sin, but I think the evidence for that is actually a little bit thin on the ground. The fact that I don't think we have enough information in the passage to really determine what Ham did wrong. But what is important is that Noah then curses Ham and his line, right? So what that reflects really is the enmity between the Israelites and the Canaanites. Right? The Canaanites are the cursed people who were in the Promised Land when we got here. They were the people we had to fight to claim this land. And actually, one of these sort of interesting legacies of this little story, of this idea, is that now, within the territory of modern Israel and the Palestinian territories, both the Israelites, both the Israelis and the Palestinians, in their archaeological projects, are looking for links between their earliest cultural expressions and the Canaanites to prove that they were in fact the legitimate descendants of the people who were there first.
They're still fighting over the land over there?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, they've been doing it for.
Yeah. And it's really heated up since the 1940s with sort of various cooling periods. But yeah, no, it is. There is a great deal of dispute over, shall we say, who owns what and who belongs where. And yeah, it actually does have roots that are this ancient. So anyway, like what a lot of people regard as the most boring parts of the book of Genesis, these long genealogies, and so begat so, and his sons were so and so, and Mehubalah begat Jerubbaal, and Jerubbaal begat Mehembabo, and so on and so forth, right? All of these sort of long names that we have no real context for. A lot of these are the names of cities and nations, in fact. And what these genealogies are actually doing, what they're actually determining, is the relationship between these other peoples and the Israelites. In fact, even within the Israelites themselves, right, we can see, we recall that Ishmael, right, is the son not of Abraham's wife, but of his wife's slave girl, right, of her handmaiden. We don't get this portion in the anthology, but in the story of Jacob, right? Jacob has two wives, right? Leah and Rachel. He has legitimate sons by each wife, right? The sons of Leah, I believe, are Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Judah. The sons of Rachel are Joseph and Benjamin. So where do the other 6 sons come from?
Is that Judah?
Judah, yeah.
Improper relationships with concubines.
Well, not necessarily improperly. It's at least the way it's phrased in the narrative, the wives give their handmaidens to Jacob as concubines, and then the children from such unions are regarded as their legitimate offspring. So Rachel's handmaiden, for example, has children long before Rachel ever does.
Are those the children they were talking about when he said he gave the children to Leah, and then he said he gave the children to the handmaid and then to Rachel?
Yeah, he's dividing them up based on who their mothers are.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so the other 6 sons are the children of the 2 handmaidens, right? Gad, Dan, Naphtali, Issachar, Asher, and I'm missing one.
Is that Dan?
Dan, yeah, D-A-N. Zebulun. Now, the explanation most scholars give for this, right, that 6 of the sons are the sons of the actual legal wives of Jacob, and the other 6 are sons of handmaidens, right? All of these sons are the fathers of tribes. And the sons of the legitimate wives, it's argued, were the 6 tribes that were original members of the Israelite Confederation. And the other 6, the sons of the handmaidens, these were tribes that might have been related but did not join the Israelite Confederation until later. So the fact that they're the children of slave girls indicates that they're not quite historically in the same line. And there's a similar thing there with Ishmael, right? It's like, yeah, okay, we acknowledge our kinship with the Ishmaelites, but they're not quite in the same line that we are. So yeah, these are groups that were probably incorporated into the nation later. Okay, any questions about any of this so far? Everybody still with me? Okay, good. Where are we for time? Does anybody know?
It's 10:08.
Okay. All right, so we got... Right, so 9:30. Yeah, we got plenty of time, right? Okay, yes, good. Okay, so one thing that I would like to do, if nobody, does anybody have, I know that this was a very long and roundabout way to answer what's going on with your question. One more thing that I would like to point to there, right? What do we have at the end of this little story in which Jacob wrestles with God or with the angel or whatever it is? What's the very last thing we get in this story? A rule. We get a rule, yeah. We get a rule. So what does the rule indicate about the origins of this particular portion. Which of the 4 major strands of Genesis narrative is largely about rules?
The priestly.
Yeah, that indicates an origin in the P text, right? Right? They love rules, they love rituals. And yet, what is Jacob's experience of God or with God in this passage?
It's a human one.
Yeah, it's a human one. This guy shows up at the ford and says, let's wrestle, right?
Pretty fast.
So, where do we usually see these extremely humanized representations of God? Yeah, this is for that, yeah. The anthropomorphic God is something that we see usually in the J strand. So what we have here again is probably 2 stories woven together, right? Or a story woven together with a rule that was made later. At the time that the J strand was written, there probably weren't any kosher rules, right, about what you could or couldn't eat. But by the time the priestly strand is written, there absolutely were codified rules about what you could or couldn't eat. Yeah, Jenna.
Okay, you mentioned originally there were 3 writers with the first 5 books.
4, actually 4.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, what was the 4th one who probably wrote one?
Okay,
Never explained that.
okay, and the reason I never explained that one is because there is only one book out of the first 5 that seems to have been written entirely by one person. Right? Deuteronomy is probably entirely the work of one person. It's also, by a long shot, the shortest of the first 5, right? Deuteronomy is quite brief. It purports to be an account of Moses' final message to the Israelites as they cross the Jordan into the Promised Land. We call the author of Deuteronomy the Deuteronomist, or D, because he didn't write anything else, at least in the Torah, the Pentateuch. And because his hand does not seem to appear anywhere in the other 4. So that's why I haven't mentioned this one, because he doesn't show up in Genesis, in Exodus, in Leviticus, or Numbers.
I was just asking because I was curious.
Yeah, no, and it's a perfectly valid and legitimate question. I'm actually glad you asked it because it then gives me an excuse to introduce this. Okay, so Deuteronomy is written probably at a sort of stage in between the J and E authors and the P author, at a point before the Israelite religion is fully organized and codified, but at a point where it's become rather more than a fertility religion. Right, so the book of Deuteronomy reflects a sort of spiritual or ethical concept of religion, right? The relationship with God is no longer largely transactional like it was in most ancient Near Eastern religions, right? It's no longer, right, I propitiate God in order to get blessings or avoid curses. It's, God sets out a model of behavior that he wants human beings to follow. So yeah, that's what we see in Deuteronomy, in the D strand. It's more about how to treat other people ethically. The Deuteronomist also is probably the author of the book of, I think it's the Book of Chronicles, and may also is sometimes identified with the author of the Book of Jeremiah as well. Might be the same person. Some scholars have argued that these 3 books are all written by the same person. But yeah, so that's what's going on with the 4th author. Yes, Taylor.
You mentioned something about the redactor, the editing hand.
Uh-huh.
I know that's not the fourth author, that's another separate.
That's the priestly, under sort of priestly.
Maybe. There are some scholars who argue that the redactor who put everything together and the priestly author are the same person. Or it's the same group of people. That idea was a lot more popular maybe 50, 60 years ago. Most more current hypotheses about biblical authorship regard the editor, the redactor, as a separate person. And maybe even as adding to some of the texts as well. Now, the reason that I haven't focused too much on the redactor is because the older documentary hypothesis, even if it's not the absolute most current up-to-date one, is a fairly easy framework to understand. And it at least introduces you to the idea of this being a composite text woven together out of different strands of narrative. Now, speaking of which, if no one does anybody have further questions before I proceed? Devin, yeah, go ahead.
And you're talking about just from saying Jacob's name Israel, or can I go to a different?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, you can go, yeah.
Okay.
You can go someplace else.
I didn't understand the part of Jacob's dream.
Okay.
Why he had to go back to his fathers.
Okay. So can you read that for us then, that passage on page 113?
And Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran, and he came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night. When the sun set, he took one of the stones and placed and put it at his head and lay down at that place. And he dreamed and looked. A ramp was set against the ground with its top reaching the heavens. And look, messengers of God were going up and coming down. And look, the Lord was poised over him, and he said, I, the Lord, I am the God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, to you I will give it, and to your seed. And your seed shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall burst forth to the west and the east and the north and the south. And all the clans of the earth shall be blessed through you, and through your seed. And I am with you, and I will guard you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done that which I have spoken to you. And Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he said, Indeed, the Lord is in this place, and I did not know. And he was afraid, and he said, How fearsome is this place? This can be but the house of God, and this is the gate of the heavens.
Okay, good, you can stop there. Okay, so, first thing to note here. How does God communicate with Jacob? Through a dream, right? So that tells us that this story probably comes mostly from which strand? Yeah, this is probably from the E strand, right? This is probably written by the Elohist. Right, and the Elohist is much more focused on dreams rather than sort of direct experience of God. And what is the point of Jacob's dream? What does he actually see? He sees a ladder, yeah. Right, this is, I think, isn't there like there's like a sort of hymn they have you sing as a kid, like, we are climbing Jacob's ladder, something, something, something. I sort of vaguely remember it from childhood, it's been a while. But yeah, this is, the idea, Jacob's ladder. And the ladder goes from earth to heaven. And what does he see going up and down upon it? Yeah, angels going up and down the ladder. Messengers of God going up and down the ladder. Right, so from this spot, right, this is where, according to his dream, the messengers of God come and go. And then when the Lord appears to him, what does he say to him?
I am God.
Okay, yes. Hi, I'm God. And then what?
Your seed will travel all over the earth, north, south, east, and west.
Yes. The land on which you lie, what about that? The land where he's sleeping right now.
He will give it to him.
Yeah. The land on which you lie, this land where you see the gate to the heavens, right? Where my messengers are going back and forth. This is yours, right? I grant this to you. So what we have here in this story is a kind of justification of ownership of the land of Israel, right? This is where Jacob fell asleep. He saw the gates of heaven. God appeared to him and said, "This is yours." So he and his people won't end up settling here permanently for a while. But this land is eventually going to be theirs, right? So what this dream is all about is staking a claim. Right? This land is holy. This land is for people who talk with God. And this land belongs to Jacob/Israel and his children. Yeah, I mean, as I said, like really what most of the book of Genesis is about placing the Israelite people themselves in a geographical and ethnic context, right? This is where we belong. This is who we're related to. This is how we're related to them. And this is why we deal with them in the ways that we do. So this story is all part and parcel of that. Does it make more sense to you now?
But like where I stopped at,
Yeah.
and the next paragraph below it, it's
Okay.
saying that Jacob had to go back to his father.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he have to go?
Okay. And Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone he had put at his head, and he set it as a pillar and poured oil over its top. And he called the name of that place Bethel, though the name of the town before had been Luz. And Jacob made a vow, saying, "If the Lord God be with me and guard me on this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And the stone that I set as a pillar will be a house of God, and everything that you give me I will surely tithe it to you." So he's going back to his father's house because he's worried that his uncle and his uncle's sons are perhaps plotting to kill him. Right? Because he has been blessed so much and has taken so much of the riches of the land. And we know that, like Jacob, Uncle Laban is a little bit of a tricksy sort of figure, right? Jacob works for him for 7 years to get one wife, and then is given the one he didn't want. And then has to work another 7 years to pay for the one he did want. Right, so Jacob the trickster is actually outfoxed by his trickier uncle. But said uncle also becomes hostile by the end of Jacob's 14 years here. So that's why he's going back to his father's house. So he's laying this pillar here because he's not going to remain here. Right? He's staking a claim on this land. This is going to be the site of the temple. Right? I'm putting this here now. It's going to be a house of the Lord. I'm going to build a temple here. But right now, I gotta go back to my father's house and save my own life. Does that make sense?
Sir.
Okay, good. All right, anything else? Other questions, comments? Okay, then there are a couple of things that I'd just sort of like to quickly point to. Now, I want to go back to your reading for last time because we didn't really get to cover this. When we talked about the Noah story, we looked at it in terms of a story where you can tell where the fissures are, right? Where the different narrative strands are being woven together. right, we see right, there are two commandments regarding the animals. Right, one simply says, bring 2 pairs of each. The other says, bring 7 pairs of each clean animal and 1 pair of each unclean animal. Right, there are 2 different lengths of flood, right? One says 40 days, 40 nights, and the other says what? The other strand says it's 150 days, right? And God makes 2 separate covenants with Noah. And where I'd like to start is with these covenants. All right, on page 101. And in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was completely dry. And God spoke to Noah, saying, go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. All the animals that are with you, of all flesh, fowl, and cattle, and every crawling thing that crawls on the earth, take out with you, and let them swarm through the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. And Noah went out, his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every crawling thing, and every fowl, everything that stirs on the earth by their families came out of the ark. And Noah built an altar to the Lord, and he took from every clean cattle and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Now, when it says clean cattle and clean fowl, how can we use that as a clue as to which strand this is coming from?
Priestly?
This is the priestly, yeah. The other strands don't make a distinction between clean and unclean animals. And the Lord smelled the fragrant odor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again damn the soil on humankind's score. For the devisings of the human heart are evil from youth, and I will not again strike down all living things as I did. As long as all the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So seed time, harvest, cold, heat, summer, winter, day, night. How is his promise to Noah structured? This is very orderly. Right? The orderly progression of time will not cease. What else do we notice about these things here? The seed time, harvest, cold, heat, summer, winter, day, night.
Or opposites.
Yeah, these are binaries. These are binary oppositions, a la Claude Lévi-Strauss. And what are these seeming to mediate? What are these seeming to mediate between here? What are they all concerned, for one thing? Okay, weather. What else? Yep, seasons, time, right? So the promise that God is making to Noah about time, based on all these organized opposites, is what?
The time never will cease.
Okay, time will not cease. And how will time operate? Yeah, everything in its proper season, right? So we'll just have these alternating times of day, times of year, right? Everything is going to alternate cleanly and evenly from now on. It's going to work like clockwork. Everything's going to be great. Oh, and by the way, I will no longer dam the soil against humankind. So, congratulations to you. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and the dread and fear of you shall be upon all the beasts of the field and all the fowl of the heavens, and all that crawls on the ground and all the fish of the sea. In your hand they are given. All stirring things that are alive, yours shall be for food like the green plants. I have given all to you. But flesh with its lifeblood still in it you shall not eat. And just so, your lifeblood I will requite, from every beast I will requite it, and from humankind every man's brother. I will requite human life. He who sheds human blood, by humans his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made humankind. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, swarm through the earth, and hold sway over it." So this is the end of the first covenant story. And what are the last things here that Noah says, that God says to Noah? After saying, okay, time is going to proceed in orderly fashion from now on, each thing in its proper season, so everything's going to be predictable and you can, work according to that. What are the promises he's making here?
Whoever kills someone, they will die.
Yeah. And who's gonna deal with that? Who's gonna mete out that justice? Is God going to do that anymore? Yeah. God's not going to kill people directly anymore. Right? He is giving the function of justice over to human beings here, right? So, if a human being kills another human being, it's up to other human beings to punish him. Right? I'm stepping back from that. No longer will I do things like send floods to wipe out all of the unjust or the iniquitous. We also have another rule here about food, right? This is another way we can tell, okay, this is the priestly author again, right? Talking about why the Israelites are not permitted to eat rare steaks. Right? Flesh with its lifeblood still in it, you shall not eat. Right? So you have to order your steak well done. Whether you like it that way or not.
And you also have to, it's also mentioning having to sacrifice as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that's one of the points of contention in ancient Israel was over the issue of sacrifice, actually. If you wanted to eat meat, it had to be properly sacrificed. Right? So you weren't sacrificing, a cow, a sheep, a chicken, whatever, just to propitiate God, right? You were sacrificing it because you wanted to eat it, and you were giving God a portion of that sacrifice, right? You see similar things, for example, in ancient Greece, right? When you see, the heroes in the Iliad or the Odyssey, right? They will slaughter an oxen and they'll wrap the thigh bones in the fat and burn it on an altar so the smoke goes up to the gods, right? It's the same principle, right? They're gonna eat the rest of that ox. They're just giving that part
When you make
to the
that
gods.
promise or the things that can, like, we can eat steak or whatever.
They can eat steak. It just has
You know
to be
what I
well done.
mean?
Yeah.
Is it all of humankind or just the Israelites that?
Well, at this point, we're talking about all of humankind, right? There are only right now there's 8 people left on the face of the earth. So those 8 people are not supposed to eat rare meat. Now, by and large, even observant Jews no longer follow all of these rules. Although a lot of my friends who are Jewish still won't eat rare meat. But yeah, very few people actually follow all of the rules that are still laid down in these first 4 books that are big on rules. But the importance of the rule here is that it tells us something about where the story comes from, at what stage of the development of the culture it comes from. right? It comes from that stage of organized state religion where everything is about ritual and rules. But yeah, the whole thing about sacrifice, though, is like actually one of the things that we see in the J and the E authors, not so much in these excerpts but elsewhere, is this contention over where and how you're supposed to sacrifice. There were those who argued that you could only sacrifice at the temple in Jerusalem. And so if you couldn't actually get your cow to the temple in Jerusalem, you're going vegetarian for the rest of the year. There were others who argued that no, you should be allowed to sacrifice at certain high places, they were called, all around the kingdom of Israel. But the priests in Jerusalem regarded that practice as too pagan, and so tried to stomp it out. So that has little to do with what you actually read for today, but that is part of the cultural context surrounding sacrifice. Okay, so to get to the second covenant story here. And God said to Noah and to his sons with him, and I am about to establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the fowl and the cattle and every beast of the earth, with you all that have come out of the ark, every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. So, why should he promise again that he's not going to destroy human beings, unless this is a separate narrative strand, right? And is the promise that he's making here quite the same?
This is like somebody who is human, like, I might forget, so I'm going to cast this rainbow to the sky
Okay,
to be remembered.
on the one hand, yeah, he leaves this object in the sky for people to remember. Okay, this is the sign of my covenant. I'm going to put my bow up in the sky. And this seems to relate directly to something in the Sumerian story as well, right? In Gilgamesh, what does the goddess Bel-Eli put in the sky to make a rainbow to remind everyone, hey, we're never going to do this again? Right? She places her necklace in the sky. So we can tell this is an earlier strand because, one, it seems more directly connected to other ancient Middle Eastern myths. And is the promise not to destroy people more or less specific than it was in the previous promise? I will not again dam the soil against humankind. What's he actually promising here if we look at the actual wording of the promise?
He's not going to kill us for flood.
Yeah, I will not destroy you again by water, right? Reserving the right to use other methods if he so chooses, right? I'm not going to flood the earth again, right? That doesn't mean I'm not going to send something else. Locusts, rivers of blood, all kinds of fun stuff.
Named wormwood.
What's that? Hailstorm and fire, yeah.
A giant rock named wormwood that'll poison the waters of the earth.
Sure, yeah. If you're if you're a deity, you have all kinds of things in your arsenal. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I set between me and you and every living creature that is with you for everlasting generations. My bow I have set in the clouds to be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And so when I send clouds over the earth, the bow will appear in the cloud. Then I will remember my covenant between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the waters will no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will see it, to remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures, all flesh that is on the earth." And God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." So yeah, we have here a much more human-like figure taking a human-like object to remind himself and humankind that this isn't going to happen again. Right? This is not a direction we're going to go again. Now, this is also a prototype for later stories, right? We see God making covenants with people in the book of Genesis all the time, right? These kinds of agreements, right? You hold up your end and I'll hold up my end. Right? We already discussed that covenant that he makes with Jacob right? Hey, this land where you see my messengers in your dreams going up and down, back and forth, this is going to be yours. Where else do we see a covenant made in these excerpts? An agreement made.
With Abraham and Sarah, the child.
Okay, yeah. There are. There are actually two covenants made, sort of two agreements made here, right? If you look at the first one, right, 103, God's promise to Abraham. And the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your land and your birthplace and your father's house to the land I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and those who damn you I will curse, and all the clans of the earth through you shall be blessed." And Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went forth with him, Abram being 75 years old when he left Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all the goods they had gotten, and all the folk they had bought in Haran, and they set out on the way to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram crossed through the land to the site of Shechem, to the terebinth of Moreh. The Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your seed I will give this land." And he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Right? This is part of a larger pattern. God makes a promise to someone, right? That person says, okay, and that person builds an altar to commemorate it, right? Now, these promises typically have to do with what? It's an exchange, right? But it's also land, yeah. It's about land, and often also about fertility, right? I am going to give you this land. You are going to bring things out of it. Right? I'm giving this land to you because you're the best person to bring things out of it. You're going to people it with my chosen people, and you're going to make it bloom. Now, this is a really pretty incredible feat if you know very much about the geography of ancient Israel, because, about even the modern nation of Israel, because what kind of land is it?
Desert.
It's mostly desert, yes. So, seems a little bit strange for a sort of, land of milk and honey, but there you go. All right.
12,000 years ago, though.
Yeah, it was probably more fertile at one time. And there are still ways to grow things there. It requires a lot of irrigation. All right, so we are about out of time. So we're going to be moving from the ancient Middle East to another part of the Mediterranean. So we're going to be talking about Greece. We're looking at the Iliad for next time. Right, and no, not the whole Iliad, just the parts that are in the anthology. It is. But it's also too long to fit into the scope of this class. So here are the reading questions. Take what you need, however you feel like getting it, and we will see you in a week.